All right, we continue on. The name of the next talk, the next bull run for NFTs for major brands will look very different than what you think. And to give that talk, please welcome our friend Diego Borgo.
What's up, everyone? How is it? It's hot in here, isn't it? I'm stoked to be with everyone here. I'll go straight to the point. I've been following and sort of like watching everyone else talk. It's been really exciting. I'll introduce myself with the question, who the f is that guy, right? So let's start from there. I've been consulting brands in the Metaverse and sort of like NFT space for a while, also within Web3. So I've worked with Adidas back on the day when we sort of like started into the Metaverse and kicked off that sort of like bull run for brands within the space. I then went on to work with Prada, G-Star, MasterCard, Volkswagen Group, Porsche, Skoda, Cupra, Salesforce, Unilever, L'Oreal, and also Shell. So I sort of like spent a lot of time within that realm of the Fortune 500 brands, the sort of like 500 brands, the largest brands in the world. And all the work I do there is aimed at helping them to strategize, to understand better, what is in for them within Web3. And all of that is because I deeply believe that the path to mainstream adoption within Web3 and blockchain technology is going to come from the largest brands in the world. And the cool thing about that is that I'm not alone. If you look at the numbers, or if you look at how everything has sort of like evolved within, especially the last 1.5 years, we have all those brands, and I'm sure, if you look into detail, you would know majority of those logos of brands coming and entering in this space. 350 plus brands within that sort of like Fortune 500 bracket has now entered that space. And if you look among them, those that I just shown you, those are the largest brands in the world, right? We're talking about Amazon, we're talking about Alphabet, we're talking about Meta, we're talking about Toyota, Volkswagen, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. Those are brands that, regardless of where in the world you are, you know who they are, right? And they are leaning in, they are building, they are doing things, they're delivering, they're, sort of like exploring that space too. So one of the things that I really enjoy doing is looking at the past to predict the future. So if you look at where this started, it's a really good point to give us a North Star of why we are where we are, right? So everything started back in December 21 when Adidas launched into the Metaverse, made 24 million in 24 hours, and every brand after that had a slide to put in front of their board or had something to sort of like use as a use case. Obviously, Adidas was not the only brand exploring that space, or was not the only brand that wanted to do something within it, but nobody had a benchmark yet to say, okay, we can make money in this space. Okay, look at what other brands are doing. And funny enough, a week or 2 weeks later, Nike came along and bought Artifact, right? So that sort of like kick-started all that sort of like use case for brands, which is mostly focused as NFT as an asset class. What that means? That means people can buy NFTs, people can sell NFTs, brands can make money through the, sort of like the trading of NFTs. But here, what happened is that NFTs became the product rather than the enabler, right? You buy an NFT, you sell an NFT, and NFTs are not necessarily the technology that is enabling better experiences. So if you look through sort of like that process of how, NFTs got sort of like, adopted within those large brands, majority of it was connected to minting, royalty, and then rinse and repeat, right? So that for me is what I call the sort of like the initial playbook, or the first playbook of NFTs within that sort of like asset class use case. So if you remember those 350 plus brands we spoke initially, majority of them have taken pages from that playbook, they have iterated within that playbook, they have done something on the similar lines of that playbook, right? But the thing is that that playbook has proven to be extremely challenging for major brands. And that is coming down to three very simple things. One of them is treasury and finance. So if you think about large brands like the ones I'm talking about, they are mostly public traded. So how do you get a public traded company to bring a volatile asset like cryptocurrency within their balance sheet, right? Like that's a challenge that at Adidas, when we first started into the Metaverse, we started in May, we launched in December, took us most of our time to try to crack things like that, right? Which still is extremely challenging. There are solutions, there are companies out there building against it, but it's not there. The second thing is legal issues, right? We talk a lot about IP, we talk a lot about, how can now you be part of, Nike DAO or Lacoste DAO, and you can buy and sell items from that collection, or you can co-create and get rewards for co-creating. How does all of that look like in a space that yet, legally or in the law, it wasn't entirely fleshed out? And then the third thing is thinking about Web3, just the native user over Web3 as sort of like the Web2 user, right? So there's a main difference here, which is most of those brands really focus on talking to the native user, so the users that already have a wallet, the users that already understand the technology, the users that are already within the space, over talking to the users that they already have within their brand. So that has been obviously a very challenging thing to do, because if you think about numbers, there's about 1 million active wallets in the NFT space today. In traffic within the marketplace, we're talking about 30 million hits a month all together, which is super tiny. But if you look at the overall audience within Web2, there is a much larger and a much more meaningful number within it, which brands are not necessarily looking at, not within this first playbook. So the more I work with brands, the more I had to sort of like think on what is the actual problem that Web3 solves for brands? What are the challenges that they have, or what are the opportunities that they have that Web3 can solve, or that Web3 is really well positioned to potentially, make a dent there and start pushing innovation? And the conclusion I got to is that brands don't have a Web3 problem. Brands have an engagement, loyalty, and growth problem or opportunity, depending on how you want to see that. So for me, the way I'm start looking into that is almost like this pyramid of value where you have engagement, loyalty, and growth. And then in between that, you have Web3 as the enabler. Because if you talk to tech people, the way that they like looking at problems or opportunities from a tech standpoint is start with the opportunity, start with the problem, then reverse engineer what is the best technology to solve it. And in Web3 so far, that's been the opposite. Brands want to do something in Web3. We have to do Web3. Web3 is the product, right? So within that, let's zoom in each of those parts and understand how is Web3 well positioned to actually solve that problem or tap into that opportunity in a manner that no other technology at the moment is. When you look at engagement, I think there are a couple interesting things there, but within the probably 20 that I could choose, I've chosen 3 just to give you a glimpse of the idea. So one of the first things is that you can measure engagement anywhere now, differently than with Web2 technologies, right? If you have own channels where users are signed up by email, it's easy to measure what they're doing. But if you don't, like on your social channels or on offline events or in a different place, you always need to sort of like get that email or start connecting those data points. And a lot of times it's very frictional because you have GDPR and you have all those sort of like PII data integration laws that block you from doing so. Now with Web3, what is interesting is that by simply integrating APIs or by even looking to Metaverse, immersive experience, you can start looking to the sort of like the physical and the digital world to start measuring engagement. So you start being able to create that sort of like omni-channel gamification that within Web2, of course, you do within your own channels, right? So if that's retail, if that's social, if that's e-commerce, if that's CRM, you're allowed or able to do it. But what if you could expand on that omni-channel, for example, by going to Reddit and being able to understand which user within Reddit has been a big fan of the brand for a long time and contributing to a community within it. So that's an exciting thing to think about. And another point that I'm really excited about is thinking about on-chain behavior being much more important than PII, meaning personal information. So whether you are, a woman that's 35 years old that lives in Faro and is interested in volleyball, not all women around that same that same age gap and that sort of like same location will be interested in the same things. A lot of times they will be having totally different interests, and those interests still today in the Web2 marketing area are basically focused on what you're actually interested in, or we build those personas, or we build those pool of people. Within Web3, you're not looking to name, zip code, address, location. You're looking into actually what people do. You're looking into their activity. You're looking into the things that they're spending their money with or they're spending their time with. This, from a marketing perspective, is a huge difference on how we look at customer behavior, and the opportunity there within engagement is really high, because as soon as you're able to measure engagement that are actual behavior over just data points, and you start looking into outside ecosystem apart from the own channels that you have, you start going to a very interesting space, which is loyalty. And there is this report from BCG that is really interesting that shows the actual problems that we have on loyalty today. And they go really into the details of saying those are the problems we have today. Those are the opportunities that Web3 is positioned to solve it, sorry. And they go breaking it down almost like one by one within those 4 pillars on why. And of course, I cannot go too much into detail because of time, but I would highly recommend whoever's interested to have a look. But in short, what you can now do within that sort of new way of measuring engagement is that you're able to give perks and rewards to your already existing membership or loyalty program. So imagine that what you have today, if you're a McDonald's member, you have that sort of unilateral relationship where McDonald's can just offer things from their brand to the customer. And a lot of times, yes, there are different partnerships happening around that enable other things to be given, but most of the time it's just this sort of one-way relationship, right? If you start looking into the technology per se and the why, Web3 is really well positioned for loyalty and membership, it becomes interesting because now brands can partner together because they can skip that issue of data integration. They can skip that issue of not being able to pull data sets or customer information together by literally having smart contracts integration in the back through APIs. So in this case, imagine if you can prove to Adidas that you are a golden tier from the Starbucks membership program, and because Adidas wants to tap within that audience, they can now ask you to prove them through, for example, a cryptographic proof or an NFT, whatever you want to do. And by proving them digitally or physically, you can get perks and benefits from that brand. So that becomes, again, a really interesting and exciting way to solve a problem and to tap into an opportunity that Web2 technology today is not able to because, again, data integration. And brand partnership in that sense at scale, which is obviously the most exciting part, is what's going to equal to growth, which is what every single brand is looking for. Growth of audience by tapping into new audiences, growth of giving more benefits within an already existing membership program. Therefore, you're able to offer more things that you could offer before. You can start fostering less transactional relationships because now instead of just giving free shipping or giving 5 cents off or things like that, you can now start giving better money can buy experiences, for example. And within that sort of growth pillar, there are 3 things that are interesting. You can increase engagement, exactly what I just said. You can tap into new audiences. So imagine that now Starbucks can talk to a Adidas audience, and for Adidas that also might be interesting because they're partners already anyway, and they can sort of increase the perks or benefits that Adidas now can offer to their already existing membership clients, and therefore they make their program more exciting, right? And it's also a new way to acquire customers, to acquire new customers. If you want to expand to other brand partnerships, for example, Adidas and Gucci, or Adidas and Peloton, Adidas and whatever, Adidas obviously already has a set of partners that they want to do stuff with, but they still very fragmented or sitting on those silos, which makes it really challenging. So for me, those are sort of like those first pages of this new playbook where we start moving away from NFTs as an asset class, from the minting, from the sort of like printing NFTs at scale, that became less and less exciting or less and less viable for brands because market has changed and obviously there is much more offering than demand. So, we need to start looking into how that sort of like second playbook is going to start iterating. And I cannot do that alone, and I won't, because that's not necessarily the role of just one person. I want to, look at that motto of WOGME, we all gonna make it, where we together start looking into how we can prepare, from a tech perspective, whoever's building tech, from a brand perspective, whoever's sitting within the big brands or medium-sized brands or startups that have funds, from a thought leadership perspective, whoever's creating content out there or training people or helping people to understand the transition we're going through. So my call to action within this talk today is to invite you all to write this new playbook together. Because if we don't, we are the forefront of that industry. If we don't do it, who's going to do it, right? Who is going to be the ones that's going to be pushing it? We're going to be sitting around and waiting others to do, or we're going to get there and do it? Because we are super early and we keep saying it, but as long as we are not building things that everybody else understands and can relate with, especially big brands and business of that size, how do we really gonna get everybody else to use it? So let's fucking go is the idea. If you wanna connect with me, feel free to scan the QR code. That's my LinkedIn. I create a lot of content on LinkedIn exactly because of that. I wanna help the masses to understand what's happening. I wanna simplify the Twitter madness and also the very hard way that we make for other people to understand what we are actually doing and what we are actually building. So my main idea here is to get everyone else in the world that's interested to understand that early on so they can be well positioned in the next iteration of the internet. Thank you very much.